Lies of P is about as perfect of a Souls-like as you could ask for, but it's also a game that I think a lot of people won't like. For me, it's two things I'm judging something on when determining how good of a Souls-like experience something is and how we can qualify its place in the genre. First, what I'm looking for is a game where if all you've ever played are games in the Souls series and its inheritors, you understand everything. If your gaming literacy was only formed by these games, everything here would still feel intuitive. The other major component I'm looking for in a good Souls-like is an introduction to new mechanics. It needs to elevate itself past just a copy, a new spin that's grounded in the Souls-like genre. Lies of P has both of these elements. Souls fans will feel right at home with the familiar structure, and the new mechanics will keep the experience unique, but that doesn't mean you'll like it. How these familiarities are implemented and the purpose they serve in the game is very different from what a Souls fan might be used to. So different, you might on the surface think it has everything that you want in a game, just to go and play it and be disappointed. There's been a lot of discourse around this game. I've seen people calling it the spiritual successor for Sekiro 2 or Bloodborne 2, and it is just plainly not true. It is not a spiritual successor to either of these games, they just wear similar clothes. If you go in with that expectation on this game, you're gonna have a weaker experience overall. For example, Pinocchio has a prosthetic in place of his normal arm that allows him to perform special abilities. This is called the Legion arm, and on the surface it looks extremely close to the Shinobi prosthetic, but they function extremely differently within their place in the game. In Sekiro, the Shinobi prosthetic exists with certain enemies and situations in mind. You can use it outside of that, of course, but in the game there is a definitive best time and best place to use the prosthetic as a counter or exploit. In Lies of P, the Legion arm doesn't exist in that way at all. It really is just ability choice and preference. Your decision on which to use will be mostly arbitrary. Some are definitely more effective versus specific enemies, but you can largely ignore the Legion arm abilities and have just as easy of a time going through the game. It is not integral to the gameplay the same way the Shinobi prosthetic is. The game doesn't reward you for proficient use of the Legion arm. It does, at least in the narrative, set up the Legion arm to be a bigger deal in the game, so you may find yourself having a difficult time here because you're trying to force more integration of the Legion arm abilities than the game is really ready to handle. Sekiro is so fundamentally different that I think anyone trying to make the argument it's a spiritual successor can't be genuine. The combat in Sekiro is much tighter, which is expected. You have one build type in Sekiro and many that need to be accounted for in Lies of P. It has similar perfect guard mechanics to cause staggers, but because the combat is much looser in Lies of P, it feels so much less rewarding when you're actually playing. This isn't to say Lies of P is bad, just to draw that clear distinction. Under the surface level, there's actually almost nothing in common between Lies of P and Sekiro. And the reason I think it's worth making this distinction is because depending on the type of game you went into Lies of P thinking it was, you might have had a terrible time. It may have seemed much more difficult than it really is. And it's hard to call that Lies of P's fault, because it's more of a problem with the discussion surrounding the game. Lies of P has a lot of flexibility on how you can play. It allows you to make mistakes by playing it in a way that isn't rewarded by the game. You can go in and play in a way that looks very similar to Bloodborne, which I think alongside its setting is probably where a lot of the sentiment of a Bloodborne spiritual successor comes in. But I cannot emphasize this enough. If you go in expecting and emulating a Bloodborne 2 experience, you're going to have a bad time. I have seen a lot of discussion about Lies of P being too difficult and that difficulty impacting player experience. This is understandable. It's very difficult and very unfun to try to put a square peg in a round hole. The game will let you try to play with a pacing similar to Bloodborne the same way it will let you make many other mistakes in the game. One of the biggest distinctions Bloodborne made in the Souls series was the pacing of combat. With an overall feel very similar to the Souls games that preceded it, it still had its own identity in combat through the removal of the shield. The game doesn't want you to block, it wants you to fight. In place of your shield, Bloodborne gives you a pistol to use as your defense. The roll mechanic was made much faster to be able to be used offensively. Any damage you take in Bloodborne is recoverable by dealing damage right back. All of the mechanics of the game push you to attack and reward a very offensive playstyle. That's what makes Bloodborne feel so fast compared to the existing Souls titles, and it's that reward to the gameplay that makes the fast combat feel right. Lies of P also takes away your shield, and it also gives you a faster dodge that can be used offensively, but it gives you nothing in place of that shield. You still block, you just use your weapon instead. When blocking an enemy attack, if timed perfectly, it only drains stamina. If too early, the hit will drain stamina and health, but similar to Bloodborne, you can recover the health lost this way. But the game's different implementations here lead to very different incentives and rewards for this heal. In Bloodborne, the game wants you to feel comfortable attacking relentlessly. The health you reclaim is the reward for that attack. It is to create a different environment where instead of getting hit and feeling the need to pull back and gather yourself, Bloodborne asks the player to push on the assault and to know you're going to get that health back. It rewards behavior to get faster paced combat. In Lies of P, the game wants you to feel uncomfortable blocking. The health you reclaim is not an incentive to attack faster. It's actually incredibly generous in how long it lasts and how it will let this reclaimable health stack as long as you only take damage through the guard. As soon as you take unguarded damage, all the health that was possible to get back is now lost. What this makes is an environment that does not reward fast play, in fact it actively punishes it. You are heavily incentivized in the game's mechanics to attack only when you're absolutely sure there's a window to safely attack. This is a core gameplay principle behind the Souls series. Here in Lies of P, it's taken to the extreme because getting damaged during your attack is not just the loss of health from the enemy attack that hits you, it's the loss of health of all the regain possible that you had lost. Raising the stakes this way lets you have much more deadly combat for the player, but it also directly rewards them for taking it slow and being deliberate. This game has plenty of weapons with fast animations. You can try to emulate the Bloodborne playstyle throughout your whole playthrough, and you probably can succeed. I'd expect plenty of people to shave that square peg until it looks pretty round. Some of them might even have fun, but that doesn't change the fact that the game definitively doesn't support that in the ways it rewards the player. Lies of P is slow in its combat. If placed in conjunction with the FromSoft titles, it's possible it might even be the slowest game in the lineup. Not in terms of how fast the individual animations are, but in the style of play that is rewarded by the game's systems. And I don't think that's bad, I just think that players should be aware of what they are signing up for and not misled on how this game wants you to behave. The highest praise I can offer this game is it feels like something that FromSoft would release and fits cleanly into that existing lineup. The game is absolutely worth playing. The city of Krat is beautifully designed, and you have a good variety of landscapes to visit throughout the game. The storyline is great to the point it's inspired me to track down the original story to better analyze this interpretation and understand the creative direction. All of that being said, you still might not have fun. It is that slow, methodical Souls formula through and through, but with plenty of new mechanics injected that fans of that style will find plenty to enjoy here. And for fans of the inheritors only, like Sekiro and Bloodborne, who aren't fans of that slower gameplay, I still think there's plenty of fun to be had here, just probably not in the way that you want. Give it a try, just know what you're getting into. Thank you.